Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting, scholarly, comics-loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I'm delighted to be joined on this episode by Dr. Christian Hines. Dr. Hines, Christian, thank you for jumping in and joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is like a dream come true. I read your work when I was a doc student, so being able
Oh,
to talk to you now and like reading your book, I'm just like I get to talk to Jason Hart about comics. I'm so excited.
well, I always enjoy talking with you as well, and I know we've connected on a couple of publications, we've connected on a couple of mutual interests, and you're joined by two other friends behind you. Is this, I think that's Shuri, and is that Riri Williams as well? Is that right?
Yes, two of my favorite teen comic girls right now,
Very
Shuri and
nice.
Ironheart. Very excited for the Ironheart series next year.
Yeah.
Um, Cannot wait to see what Ryan Coogler is going to do with that. So that's one of my most anticipated shows coming up.
Yeah, definitely an auteur, a guy that took Black Panther. Once upon a time, Black Panther was going to be like an Indiana Jones kind of adventure film in the early 2000s, and I just love what he did with that story and both of those films.
I do too. That, and I don't know if you've seen the like behind the scenes when him and Ludwig were talking about the music and
Mm.
how they selected the music and seeing all the behind the scenes that went into the movie, rewatching it makes that experience so much more richer. Like the research that they put in and the intent. Like I
Yeah.
love Ryan Coogler and all of his films.
Yeah. Well, for folks out there that don't know your work, I'm curious about anything that you'd want to share as far as your background in education and sort of your interest in teaching.
Okay, so currently, right now, I am an assistant professor of literacy at Texas State University in San Marcos. But before then, I was a high school teacher. So I taught high school and middle school in Florida for about 8 years. I did a lot of the English language arts electives. So
Hmm.
I was the yearbook teacher, the social media teacher, creative writing. So all of the fun things and the things that didn't require a lot of curriculum. So I had to build a lot of curriculum, which is how I got to blend my love of comics, my love of like young adult literature with my actual professional side because I
Yeah.
would talk to the students. We had these 90-minute block classes, and I'm like, okay, what are some things you all are interested in? And they were reading books at the time. It was like 13 Reasons Why was a very big book. They had just came out of like the Twilight phase, the Hunger Games phase. Um, the Hate You Give was really huge in the movie. So being able to talk to them about what they like. And then one day, one of the kids, we started talking about Avatar, The Last Airbender, because they were reading a comic. And I was like, there's a comic for that? I was like, I watched the TV show and we bonded over that. And that kind of got me into a lot of the research that I do now with doing pop culture and looking at popular culture and literacies. I lean more into comics and graphic novels right now, but I do pop culture as a whole because there's so much that we
Mm.
can learn from the stories that kids are watching and the stories that we're engaging in. And also, I'm forever a big kid, so I I get up and I still watch cartoons, I still watch TV shows. So being able to have these like deep conversations with students about what they're watching um, affects a lot of my professional background. And also, I have to say, my mom is a teacher, so
Yeah.
her being
Yeah.
a teacher had a huge influence on me. I was always sitting in her classroom, even on our personal time. Like she taught Sunday school, I would help teach her doing Sunday school. So I always did things that were in service to other people. So that impacted me a lot. But yeah, my high school teaching, if it wasn't for my high school teaching, I probably would not have ended up in higher ed, specifically talking about the things that I talk about now. And I give that credit to the kids that I had. They were amazing kids and they just loved to talk about what they were watching, what they were gaming
Yeah.
with, and bringing that into the classroom.
Yeah. I have to credit my students as well because I never knew how comics would go over, how, certain texts would go over. And the fact that my students took it, ran with it. The teachers are always looking for those things that connect with kids and that can make the class better. At least if you're, engaged and thinking and reflective. And so to get that kind of feedback from students and get to explore, it's a wonderful moment when you find those places where you connect.
My kids are the reason that I do Dungeons and Dragons now. They would just sit in my classroom and host their own campaigns. And one day I just sat there and I was like, tell me what you're doing. And they were explaining and watching them make up their stories and stuff. And now when I play it, I'm like, I really wish they could see me now and be like, look, Miss Hines is finally playing D&D like all these years
Absolutely.
later.
We can splice in some footage right here, the D&D competition. Um, yeah. So curious about the questions you're exploring right now. What's really kind of piqued your interest at the moment about comics and fandom?
So right now I'm in these two separate veins. They kind of are blending together, but I like to look at adolescence in comics, hence why I have like Shuri and Riri. But I've
Hmm.
been doing this thing about first when we're thinking about superhero comics, like what does it look like for these young people, especially these young diverse people to have to grapple with their racialized identity and also with being a superhero and going through adolescence because like Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent can get up and go to work every day, but these kids still have to go to school, they still have to answer to their parents, they're still trying to figure out the world and what does that look like when they're trying to be engaged in the community, save the community. So I've been doing a lot of adolescent studies within comics and talking a lot about that with my pre-service teachers and also because I like to tell them think about like their schooling experience because I think of the things that I wish I would have had as a student.
Hmm.
And we were reading a lot of texts and a lot of classic texts, and a lot of classic texts don't always come from the adolescent experience. So being able to look at texts that actually hold like adolescent experiences and diverse experiences, I've been looking at things like that. I'm looking at like Static Shock, going back into those type of comics, looking at the Champions, Young Justice, but even like the non-superhero stuff. What is his name? Tony Weaver just had a book that came out, Weirdo, and I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
did that. I love his content. So thinking about like the awkward kids, the kids that were never popular, especially like awkward Black kids, because I was like an awkward kid who loved like anime and manga. Like I was a Sailor Moon girly in the
Yeah.
90s. And a lot of people weren't watching like anime the way they are now, the way it's popularized now. And like the things that I would write fan fiction or when I was in class writing stories, it would be about these characters because they were young characters who were learning the world, but they had these magical powers. So I kind of look at that in literacy, like taking the adolescent experience, but also because these are heroes that are giving back to their communities at a micro level. I like to
Hmm.
talk about like how are kids empowered by seeing these stories? How do they take these stories and figure out like maybe ways they would like to be engaged in their community, like doing community service projects, service learning, learning about voting, showing up to like town halls. So I look at a lot of that right now, looking at adolescent superheroes and like racialized adolescent identities and just really cool, weird kids.
Love it. Love that. You mentioned finding those areas that connect and thinking about the things that you would want as a student if you're a teacher, which I totally agree with. I like to think through that way too, and like, how could I have made school better for me and more enjoyable? Uh, any other pieces of reflection that you would share with educators out there to be thinking about and circling around related to comics or anything else from your work?
Kind of keep it in that same vein. I do ask my students that question a lot. And sometimes some of them will tell me, well, I didn't have a bad experience at school. Like my teacher was great. I love school. And I'm just like, okay, well, let us explore why you love school and who was school set up for. So having them like do that interrogation. So let's take the things that you love. What did you love about it? You were seen, you felt like the classroom represented you. So let's take that for kids who may not have that experience and how are you going to bring that in. And I also like to tell my students, or like even for me, I know it's tough sometimes when engaging in comic and graphic novels. I've had pre-service teachers, other colleagues like, well, Christian, I don't read comics. I don't know that. Like, I don't feel like that's my wheelhouse. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to be a sage on the stage. Let the kids show you.
Absolutely.
I got into reading manga, but I was reading Sailor Moon manga. But when my students were reading like Bleach and Dragon Ball, they're telling me about the stories. Like I'm okay learning from them. So I like to tell teachers like it's okay to learn from your students. It's okay not to be a sage on the stage, and also watch what they're watching. If you don't know
Hmm.
it, watch a cartoon, watch an anime. It you may not get into all of them, but it can spark a conversation about things that you may not be familiar with. Like one of my kids told me about Steven Universe. And I was like, I'm not watching that. And then during the pandemic, I was like, I will watch this. And so I'm watching this show. And now I use this show in my class because it teaches about trauma and healing and emotional
Hmm.
regulation. But my students were the ones telling me that, like, Miss Hines, Stephen is doing this, he's doing that, he's going to therapy. Like, you don't see shows with kids going to therapy and talking about their feelings and being able to bring that into the classroom, especially if we're talking about like trauma-based pedagogy and trauma-influenced pedagogy. How do we talk to kids about this? How do we show them things? And I'm like, you have free resources and free materials right here in pop culture,
Hmm.
and the kids can tell you that what they're watching and why they're watching it. So those are some of my things, is like, try something new. Try, it's okay to learn from the kids. It's okay to listen to them and hear from them. Or also like non-traditional learning, like go to a comic convention. I just learned in the last few years the educational panels they have at cons. I was just going to cons just to go to
Hmm.
cons. And I'm like, you can learn so much from people who are doing this work if you just put yourself out there. And I know as a teacher, it's, we already have a lot to carry, but the fun things, you can still learn a lot from the fun things. So like those are some of the reflections that I would have, mostly that came from my students.
Yeah. The I have a light bulb that is like freaking out over here. Let me pause the recording. So, what are your some of your favorite conventions? I have to ask.
Ooh. So when I lived in Florida, I always went to the MegaCon in Orlando. That was the biggest one we had at the time, and Tampa Bay Comic Con.
Hmm.
I got recently, so last year I went to New York Comic Con for the first time. And this year I went to San Diego Comic Con for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to the two meccas. I will have to say though, I love New York, and New York is where I will probably frequent the most. The New York Comic Con was so amazing, and not just because of the cosplay, like going to the artist alley and talking to the artists, talking to the writers. I got to meet Jerry Dugan, who did the Krakoa era of X-Men, which I absolutely loved. And it was like right after he wrote the Hellfire Gala comic last summer. So I literally went to his table and was like, why did you kill them? They were my favorite X-Men. And he just laughed and he was like, just wait. I promise there's more coming. And I was like, why would you do that? So being able to go to Comic Cons and like meet your favorite creators and writers and talk to them. New York has been my favorite so far. I've explored a couple now that I've lived in Texas. They have like Superhero Con and Space Con, and they have a ton of cons in Texas, all over. Um,
Nice.
so there are so many, but New York is probably going to be at the top of my list for my favorite con.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so many creators, I find of authors in general, they're just kind people. Most of them want to talk about their work and are very kind. I'm sure there are some out there that are not as kind, but I haven't met as many of those, and they probably don't go to that many shows anymore. So it's a great experience.
And I'm finding a lot more independent, smaller cons. Like I know there's like a Blur Con, and then there's like a Black Comics Festival that I would like to go to. I think that's also held in New York. And they've started DreamCon, which is kind of like this diverse anime con that's blown up over the
Mhm.
last few years. So being able to find like these new independent cons that are popping up has been a lot of fun too.
Nice, nice. Any particular stories, comics, characters that currently have your attention that you're enjoying as a scholar fan scholar?
Oh, see, that's a mixed bag. So I'm re-diving back into Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur because I'm working on a project about that. And also because the TV show has come out. So being able to see Lunella now, from where she started and watching her on this Disney Plus show has been absolutely fun. I feel like a kid on Saturday morning, like it's a Saturday morning type of cartoon. So
Mhm.
I've been in love with re-engaging with Moon Girl. The stories that I have most been engaging with have been the DC line of graphic novels for young adults where they're redoing all the origin stories
I like
for all
those
the
too.
heroes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hmm.
I love those. So I just picked up the Blue Beetle one this past week. This Land Is Our Land, because I've heard such great things. I love the Starfire. I love the Lois Lane. All of their lines have been some of my favorite ones to look at. How they're repurposing the characters, how they're race bending a lot of the characters, and rewriting their origin story. They did one for Static. It was
Hmm.
called Static Up All Night, and I devoured that book in like an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Um,
Lamar Giles, is that right?
Yes,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
yes. So I love that. And with Milestone having their resurgence in the last few years, like I've been absolutely loving reading the new Milestone stories, but also trying to go back and find the original Milestone comics. Because when I was coming up, I only knew about Static, and that was mostly because of the Static Shock TV show.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
so finding out about their comics, and now they have all these copiendums. So I've been reading those a lot. But aside from superheroes, because I'm not just a superhero girl, I've been doing a lot of historical comics. So I've been reading Bitterroot, which has been really, really interesting. And that led me down a rabbit hole of I picked up Philadelphia by Rodney Barnes. I got to meet him last year. He was an amazing man. And yeah, I know, I think you interviewed him too.
I did. Hmm. Hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I remember that. And what is it? Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer.
Oh
So
yeah,
reading
yeah.
these Black historical comics and having these like fantastical horror elements have been like a side thing that I've recently got into, is like reading horror comics and like crime comics. And I'm starting to love that. And I feel like I'm gonna fall down another rabbit hole of those as well. I think Saline or Saladin Ahmed did a 1979, I believe it is. Somebody recommended to me. It's kind of like a crime thriller comic that he wrote for, I think it's either Image or Boom. It might be
Hmm.
Image.
Hmm. I think I know that one. Yeah, I can kind of picture like the logo of the
Yes.
title.
So
Yeah,
I can
yeah,
see the cover. And so like I've been collecting those to read once I finish Bitterroot, because I'm really diving into that. And there's something there that I want to explore, but also the storylines are just amazing. Like
yeah.
it's wonderful writing, wonderful artistry. I have been really loving those comics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Then I love how there's so much out there. I mean, the floodgates have sort of opened, and I hope they don't close anytime soon because, I mean, of course, you've got DC, you've got Marvel and those things, but then you have so many other publishers, so many other voices that are part of the conversation now. So it's a really great time to enjoy comics.
That has been one of the things that I've loved the most, like going into Barnes and Nobles now, and they have this huge like manga section, huge graphic novel section, things that they did not have when I used to go to Barnes and Nobles as a kid. And
Hmm.
I think at San Diego, is it Penguin that just acquired Boom? They
I
just bought
think
Boom.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So even the big publishers are like starting to jump into this, which I mean, I love Scholastic's graphics line. I recommend that to teachers all the time. Like those are some of my favorite graphic novels to recommend to for kids. Um,
Hmm.
so I mean, and you know, you're a comics person. Seeing just the love that comics, graphic novels, and manga are getting now has been such a turnaround from like what 5, 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, in terms of teachers listening in, any additional resources that you might mention?
Um, ALA, the American Library Association, I always say first, because even as a teacher, for me, my biggest support and my biggest resource was the librarian at my school. And
Hmm.
even when I did my dissertation study, which was a comic club, it was with a librarian. So I always tell teachers, we know our librarian is there, but your librarian is really there for you. Like,
Yeah.
go be cross collaborative, go talk to your librarian. They have a ton of things that they would love to share with your class, to share with your kids. They have so many resources. And also, with all the book bans that are going on, our librarians need our support just as much as we need
Hmm.
theirs. And thinking, because I'm in Texas, the things that are going on with our independent school system and them shutting down libraries, like really getting out there and supporting our librarians as a resource, but also doing things like there's a website called Unite Against Banned Books. I've been telling a lot of my students, because they're aware of the book bans, but they aren't aware of the scope of book bans and what's really happening. So I'm like, there are things to talk you through it, ways to get involved in the community, ways to throw events, ways to be informed, and still be employed, because of course that is a big consideration. but
Hmm.
also thinking about not even just your school library. I also like to tell teachers your public library, going to community literacy events, hosting a community literacy events, taking the wonderful things that are happening in your classroom, even inviting some of your students and taking that to a public library or joining in on some of the public library or volunteering. Our public libraries need our support. And with a lot of restrictions that are happening in the classroom, public libraries sometimes have a lot more freedom than we have. So they are good sources of thinking about different ways to approach literacy, curriculum, pedagogy, in a way that still involves the community and families. So I think about that. And Pop Culture Classroom is a website that I like to
Hmm.
go on a lot. They have a lot of resources, book reviews, book resumes, wonderful way to walk you into any type of pop culture that you may not be aware of, and kind of give you like that scaffolding and that support. Pop Culture Classroom has a lot of resources that are helpful. And Edutopia, like I've read a bunch of your pieces on Edutopia. I've assigned a lot of the Edutopia like videos and articles
Hmm.
to even my students. So looking at public scholarship and looking at what other teachers across the globe are doing is always helpful to spark ideas or even just to meet new people to do. I'm like, once again, I'm very big on cross collaboration, learning from others. So being able to see what other teachers are doing and reaching out and never knowing who you'll meet. And then my favorite thing that I've recently gotten into, zines. I know zines
Hmm.
are making a huge comeback. They've been doing a ton of zine workshops at a lot of the literacy events that I've been going to, and especially at my library. So I tell teachers, do zines. Look up
Yeah.
zines, watch all the zine videos, put zines in your classroom, do all of these things. And I'm telling you, like, your students will be so engaged. So those are, it might have been too much, but those are like the
No,
recent
that's
things
great.
that pop up that I would recommend because there are things that I still use and things that I tell my students, like, do this in your classroom or try this and let the kids tell you if it worked or not. They'll tell you if they liked it. And if
Oh
they
yeah.
tweak it, they'll let you know. Um, so those are, yeah, those are some of the things that community literacy, get outside the box, get outside your classroom. And I say that as when I was a first year teacher and they threw me in that yearbook class and nobody in my school taught the yearbook, I had to email other schools in the area and literally take days off to sit in other people's classrooms, to talk with them, to meet with them. And it's because of those things. It was very hard for me, but it helped me be who I am today. And it
Hmm.
helps me to tell other people to reach out and really cross collaborate, engage, learn, go outside of your classroom, go outside of your school, go to different communities. There's so much to learn and so many resources that will be beneficial to not just you as a professional, but to your students.
Very well said. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, not too many resources at all. I love it. And Christian, it's always great to talk with you. I'm glad to talk with you anytime. We've, as I said, ran across one another in terms of research and scholarship and writing. So always glad to have a conversation.
Excited. Now I want to ask you one. What are you
Yeah.
reading right now?
Oh, what am I reading? Well, I'm currently reading some of the comics prose from the 90s and on, but there's been like a recent Batman, like the 89 series. They
Mhm.
brought that back as far as like some of that. There's a story that connects into that. So I've got that novel on my nightstand at the moment. And then I've been reading, there's a Plastic Man series that just came out not too
Mm.
long ago that's really
Oh,
interesting that they've done some interesting stuff with and enjoying some Space Ghost as well.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
See, there's so much.
Hmm.
Have you seen Timid by Jonathan Todd? I think it is.
Yes, yeah. Timid is
So
great. Yeah,
I picked that up. So that's part of my like Awkward Kid series that I've been doing. Like outside of the superhero stuff, it's the Awkward Kid stuff has really been pulling at me lately. There's a lot of
yeah,
really good books for kids that I think are would be cool to teach.
yeah. I also just saw, I'm not always about comics adaptations, but the comics adaptation of Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I just saw
Hmm.
that the other day. Looks really interesting as well.
Do you know they did one about the lottery?
I
The
think I've
short story,
seen
The
that.
Lottery?
I think I've
I
seen
just
that around.
I just found that out earlier this month because it's, another colleague recommended it to me when we were talking about banned books because they were like, there's a scene in that graphic novel that put that graphic novel on the banned books list now. And I was like, I didn't know they did an adaptation of The Lottery. And I used to teach that in creative writing. And I was like, that's very interesting. So
Yeah.
looking at those adaptations too, I think, and the classics, I like how they've been remixing the classics like Anna Green Gable. They have like Anne of West Philly,
Hmm.
Little
Hmm.
Women. They have the diverse Little Women. They have the Secret Garden of 8th Street. So I know they've been doing like the middle grade remixes of the classics and making those graphic novels.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, we were talking about Image. I mean, there's Image, Dark Horse. There are all of these companies out there that are making
Mhm.
great things, and the indie market as well. I'm still waiting on Epiphany Engine. I backed that on Kickstarter, and so it's a collection of like I'm gonna lowball this 50 or more creators of color that have gotten together and created this anthology series.
Ooh,
Yeah, I'll have to send you the link for that.
okay.
Yeah, I will definitely do that. And I can't remember
Oh,
everybody that's involved with that. I think Rodney Barnes did some work on it. And lots of people have put their creative energy into that.
that's the one thing that I have been enjoying about cons is finding these independent publishers. That's how I found Godhood Comics and Chispa that they've been doing these new line of like Latinx comics and graphic novels. And some of them are more adult, some of them are for kids. So these indie publishers are really like pushing the boundaries and they're really moving beyond like so they can get more exposure besides the big two. And I don't think it's the big two. I think with Image and Boom, it should be like the big four now.
Oh yeah, totally, totally.
There's so many other publishing houses that are getting a lot of recognition now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, as you mentioned, I mean, Penguin acquired Boom, so almost every, if not every major publisher now has a comics kind of branch, wing, um, cave. I don't know how you would say that, but it just adds to what's out there and adds to the creativity and the talent and the voice. So I'm all there for it.
Oh, and webtoons. I forgot
Hmm.
web comics. I though that's another resource for because I know how it is to get classroom sets of things. Webtoons and webcomics generally are free. There are some you have to subscribe to, but also how they're moving those into now like physical format. But yes, teachers, please look at webtoons, webcomics. Your students are probably reading those too. It's their graphic version of Wattpad.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Now,
So
one more recommendation to ask you about Sarah Meyer, Monstrous. Have you seen that?
I've seen the cover. I haven't read it yet.
Hmm.
Okay, so I
It,
will add that to the list.
yeah, if you're interested in sort of the comics awkward young person, it's a really good one. And it
Okay.
won the Eisner last year.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay. I
Yeah.
will definitely pick that up. I have seen it. Going. Is it a Frankenstein retelling or no?
No, it's like a personal, like
Okay.
autobiographical graphic novel.
Okay. That reminds me of I can see the cover, but I can't think of the name. The one about the girl, she from Wuhan.
Hmm. Hmm.
What's your name? Because
Messy
I would
Roots.
Yes, yes, Messy
Yes.
Roots. Yes, I love that. And I'm like, I can see the cover. That was also another really good autobiographical graphic novel that I
Hmm. Hmm.
enjoyed last year. So I would recommend that too. You talking about monsters made me think of Messy Roots.
Yeah, that's Laura Gal. Laura has a new book. I just got approved for it today to read an advanced copy. And so I'm hoping to talk with them about that
Okay.
new book sometime soon. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, we could go on. We
All day.
could totally list. It's really a wide and fruitful market and just so many wonderful things to take to the classroom.
It is. And I would also say read it for enjoyment, but as a
Hmm.
teacher, read it for what you can learn about your students, students that are different from you, students from different ethnic backgrounds, cultural heritage. That's a lot of the stuff that I write about. I mean, you've seen it talking about like the Black girl literacies with Black girl comics, but it opens so many doors the same way we all love regular and traditional literature as a mirror, window, and sliding glass door. Now you have this visual text with so many multiple ways to interrogate it and to learn about people you may have never been exposed to. So read it for enjoyment, but read it for education and then give it to your kids for those same reasons.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, on that note, I promise you a brief talk. I will let you go, but perhaps we will cross paths again in some work. I think we have a journal to work on at some point, and we may see each other at a con. You never know.
Oh, you will see. Jason, you're not going to get rid of me. If I have to stalk you for the rest of my career, I'll be like,
I
I know Jason DeHart. That's my friend.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate that, and I consider you a friend as well. And please come back anytime to talk teaching, comics, fandom, and all the things.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed my time and I would love to come back again.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, farewell to you, but not farewell for a long time, and farewell to Shuri and Riri. But of course, they're gonna be coming back sometime soon as
Of
well, I'm
of
sure.
course.